Number 10. Bad teacher. A high school teacher in Florida was arrested in February 2018 after getting into a fight at a baseball game. Perhaps the most shocking part about this story is that the woman wasn't in an argument over which team was better, or even anything to do with the game she was watching. Instead, she got angry with another mom attending the baseball practice because her shorts were too short. Clearly, this teacher does not like short shorts. Her name is Terry Lee Coursey, 37 years old. Terry was suspended from her position at Clay High in Green Cove Springs after her arrest. According to the victim, Terry started the confrontation by criticizing her choice of clothing, or rather lack of. What could have been resolved with words then spiraled out of control and escalated to violence. Terry launched herself at the victim and punched her in the face. Terry was so upset that this woman would show her legs at a baseball game that she bludgeoned her face with her fists like a disgruntled animal. We're sure we can all appreciate the irony in that. But it was a real shame for the victim. She was bruised, cut, and wounded at a sports match for no good reason. Terry's insane outbursts had her lose her job and end up in the back of a police car. Oh yeah, and she was publicly shamed. Number 9. Brawling at the Steelers game. Almost everyone has seen the viral video of two people being beaten up by one man with a heavy fist at a Steelers game in the summer of 2021. This has got to be the most watched video of a fight at a football match in recent memory. If you've ever wondered what happened to those people in the video, you're in for a treat. First, let's describe what happened for those who don't know. The clip is short, but shows a woman who seems to be drunk getting belligerent with a man seated in front of her. He remains calm while the woman screams in his face. At least he's calm until she slaps him across the mouth. He cocks his fist back in defense. Another man jumps into the picture and tries to hit him, and that's when he lets his fists fly. He beats the woman back and the other man too, and then walks away as calmly as he possibly could. Clearly, this is not somebody you want to be fighting. According to the Pittsburgh Police Department, they managed to track the woman down and issue her a citation for disorderly conduct. Even though she already paid for her belligerence with a punch to the face, she'll now literally have to pay money to the government for it. Number 8. The Hillsborough Stadium disaster. On April 5, 1989, one of the worst disasters in sports history unfolded at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield, England. It was the semi-final match between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. Just before kickoff, in an attempt to settle down the crazed sports fans who were overcrowding the turnstiles, the police match commander ordered exit gate C to open up. There were too many people outside, and so the commander let them flow into the stadium. What happened next was terrible. An influx of Liverpool fans rushed into the pens, resulting in massive congestion, panic, and horrible chaos. People were crushed against steel fencing, trampled, and torn apart as if they were in a drunken mosh pit. In the chaos, 700 people were injured and 96 Liverpool fans died. They were trampled over because there wasn't enough room inside the pen. It was absolute pandemonium and the biggest death toll in British sporting history. People were literally shoved against the mesh fencing at the front of the pen with such unbelievable force that they were killed. Imagine someone pushing you against the fence so hard that you died. It's horrible, but that's what happened. Nobody was spared, with the victims being identified as between 10 and 67 years old. 37 teenagers tragically lost their lives during this upsetting incident. One thing that did come of this was reform. Standing sections at stadiums were taken out and replaced by seating areas. The fences around the field were removed, and other general safety rules were put into effect. It doesn't take away the loss of life, but at least this kind of thing is less likely to ever happen again. Number 7. Violence in Sweden. As you may already know, sports violence is not specifically American. It happens everywhere, even somewhere as peaceful as Sweden. In 2014, on March 30th, a middle-aged man was assaulted near Helsingborg's Olympia Stadium. It was the first day of the new season, about 2:30 in the afternoon. The victim was a fan of Stockholm's Djurgården. The victim got into an argument with fans of the opposing team before the game even started. The fans of Helsingborg clubbed him over the head with an object and then left him in the street to die. The victim was found, taken to the hospital and died shortly after. The game was then stopped after just 41 minutes, with the score tied 1-1. It created quite the uproar and devastated the community. What's really bizarre is that Sweden, although one of the countries with the lowest crime rates in the world, has one of the highest rates of sports violence. Usually, it's just brawling in the street. This was the first fatal episode of fan violence since 2002, when a different man was beaten to death in Stockholm. What's the worst incident of fan football violence that you've ever seen? Let us know about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe before the end of the video. Number 6. Mob brutality. A Brazilian mob killed a referee in one of the most brutal sports-related slayings of all time. It happened on June 30th, 2013. It was an amateur game in the Brazilian state of Maranhão. Referee Octavio da Silva flashed a red card and tried to kick one of the players out of the game. The player was Josenir dos Santos. He didn't think the referee was being fair and didn't want to get off the field. This resulted in a shouting match between the two. In most games, the shouting would have gone on until the player grudgingly left. But the referee took it to a whole new level of violence. He pulled out a knife and stabbed Josenir dos Santos right there on the field, in front of the spectators. You can probably imagine the pandemonium that erupted after. Just think if a referee stabbed your favorite player in the middle of a match. The fans would go crazy. And that's exactly what happened in Brazil. It was mob mentality at its absolute worst. Fans flooded down from the stands and onto the field, throwing stones and screaming. They cornered the referee, beat him to death, and then pulled his head off his body. It was utter barbarism, like something you might expect to see in the Colosseum in ancient Rome. The angry mob then took his severed head, plunged it onto a stake, and shoved that stake in the middle of the field, like a barbarian flag. At the end of the day, obviously none of this should have happened. The referee should never have stabbed the player, and the fans should never have decapitated him. It was the epitome of rampaging sports fans gone terribly, terribly wrong. Number 5. An accidental tumble. In 2016, after an exciting football game between the Denver Broncos and the Houston Texans, a man leaving Denver's Mile High Stadium died. It had nothing to do with fan violence. Instead, he tumbled off the stadium's north side and plummeted 50 feet to the ground. According to the Associated Press, he was discovered near Gate 5 just before 10 o'clock at night, then pronounced dead upon his arrival at the Denver Health Medical Center. How could such a devastating tragedy have occurred? Stadium management said that he fell over a stairwell, completely by accident. And while this may shock you, this was not the only tragic falling death at a sports game. In 2013, a fan fell off an escalator at a preseason game at the same stadium. Then in 2015, another fan fell between the concrete stairwell landings while trying to catch a hat. Clearly, Denver Stadium needs some better guardrails. It's also not only in Denver. On August 12, 2013, a fan died at Turner Field after falling 85 feet. In 2008, a man died in Atlanta during a game against the Mets by falling down a stairwell. There are so many falling deaths that happen at sports games in the US, it would take me all day to keep listing them. Number 4. Riot in Egypt. There have been some pretty brutal sports riots over the years, but nothing quite as violent as what happened in Egypt in 2015. A riot broke out at a major soccer game, resulting in a fight between the police and the fans, with over 25 people losing their lives. This wasn't the first time such violence broke out in Egypt either. The country is notorious for revolting after sports games. In 2012, yet another riot broke out that saw 74 people dead. The brutal fighting in 2012 involved fans from two rival teams, the Al Masry and the Al Ahly soccer clubs. They rushed towards one another on the field with rocks, knives, and even swords. According to CNN, 11 fans were sentenced to death for their involvement in inciting the deadly riot. The more recent riot in 2015 was less deadly, but no less horrifying. It started just before a match between the Egyptian Premier League clubs, ENPPI and Zamalek, at the Air Defense Stadium just outside Cairo. Security officials said it began when Zamalek fans rushed into the stadium without buying tickets. There was a flood of insane fans pouring into the entrance and rushing through the stadium. The Zamalek fans were met by fans of the opposing team. It turned into a mob-on-mob battle and even spread outside the stadium. Roads were blocked, buses were lit on fire, people were shooting at police cars. It was absolute insanity. The fighting didn't end until riot police showed up and finally dispersed everyone with tear gas. Number 3. Extreme lengths. Kevin Clayton was a major fan of the University of Arizona Wildcats, the men's basketball team. He never missed a game, no matter what. In December of 2017, Kevin had a business trip which would take him to Wisconsin. Once he settled down in his hotel room, he went out looking for a sports bar that was showing the Wildcats match. But he was in Wisconsin, and he couldn't find it being played anywhere. The very last restaurant he checked was Buffalo Phil's. When they said they didn't have the game on, Kevin was furious. He allegedly snuck his way into the manager's office of the restaurant, then used the phone to call the TV provider. He impersonated an employee and had the provider add the Pac-12 network so that he could watch the game. But it didn't take just one call. Kevin made 11 different phone calls to the TV provider until he was finally able to get the channels put on the restaurant's TV. He thought he was so clever that he would never get caught. He watched his game and was very happy with himself. What Kevin didn't count on was a very angry restaurant manager. When the manager realized he was paying more than he should have been for his TV, he started investigating. He learned what had happened. He called the police, and the detectives tracked Kevin down to the car dealership where he worked in Illinois. He was booked on identity theft for financial gain and is now looking at 12 years in prison, all just so he could watch a basketball game. Number 2. The Bottle Thrower. A Celtics fan threw a water bottle at Brooklyn Nets player Kyrie Irving. This happened in May of 2021 and saw the fan get in some serious trouble. Keep in mind, he only threw a water bottle, yet he was charged with assault and battery using a deadly weapon. The suspect was identified by the Boston police as Cole Buckley of Massachusetts. He was subjected to a lifetime ban from the TD Garden and could even be looking at jail time. The incident went down during the first round of the NBA playoffs. As the Nets were walking off the floor after being beaten by Brooklyn, Cole walked over to the tunnel and hefted his water bottle down at them as hard as he could. He didn't actually hit anybody, but was escorted out of the building and arrested anyway. It was the fourth time that same week that fans at NBA games threw something at the players. Apparently, tossing things at basketball players is a major problem in America. Number 1. Barroom Brawl. In November of 2018, an Alabama football fan was fatally beaten while out celebrating at a Tangipahoa parish bar. According to the local police, the officers were called to the bar very early on a Sunday morning in response to a brutal fight. Once there, they discovered 46-year-old Robert Bowers seriously injured. He had been mercilessly assaulted by 2 men. Firefighters provided medical attention until the ambulance arrived, and then Robert was taken to the North Oaks Medical Center. By Tuesday, he had passed away. Family and friends say that Robert, a resident of Louisiana, was a die-hard fan of the Crimson Tide. He had gone out to watch the Bama vs. LSU game on Saturday night. Then, in celebration, he went to the bar. That was when he got into an argument with the 2 men over the results of the game. It's believed that Robert's love for the Crimson Tide rubbed these fellows the wrong way. A man named Ryan Anthony blindsided him with a cheap shot, and then Asia Crockett got in on the beating. Both men stomped on Robert while he was helpless on the floor. It was terrible and tragic, and something that should have never happened. Just because Ryan liked a different team than these 2 guys, they felt compelled to beat him to death. They were both booked and charged with felony manslaughter and can now contemplate what they've done behind bars. Thanks for watching. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen an upset sports fan do in real life? Let us know about it in the comments below. And if you haven't already, remember to hit subscribe for all the best videos from the channel. See you next time. Bye!